is your idea that if philosophical knowledge is sufficient to clarify many of the conceptualization of ideas, then the work for the human rights movement will be greatly enhanced, and there will be much more clarity in terms of the various problems of human rights, even though they express themselves in different cultural traditions differently.
Oh, so this is one of the conditions, but the only one, not the only one.
Not the only one.
Not the only
This
one.
is the philosophical test.
Yes, and it's also it's very important for practice.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, they're quick.
Yes. How much do I owe you?
No, please, please.
No. You charge.
Just a
You
moment.
charge.
You are a guest in my room. Don't.
Yeah,
Please don't take
they
any
charge.
money outside.
They charge in hotel.
No, please. You are a guest in my room. How it's
Yeah,
possible?
he's very generous. Yeah.
A moment, please.
No, we can have the coffee first. Just take it over.
You may move. I may not. I'm sorry.
No problem.
May I move just a little?
Yes, you have within the reason of the cable, no problem.
Thank you. Would you like some more milk?
Yes,
Or-
I think more milk will go. Normally I drink this, oh, that's fine, thank you. I drink this cafe au lait, half regular coffee, but Turkish, my gosh,
Oh,
Turkish
I like
coffee.
Turkish
Coffee.
Do you like?
I like, but you can put a spoon inside with very thick coffee.
Yes, let's go to the
Yeah,
bottom,
to
and
the bottom.
you can.
Uh-huh.
Every morning I have one in Turkey, Turkish coffee.
No, I think I must say, if not the most, I think one of the most dedicated and committed to the life of the mind. You're involved in this work almost 24 hours every day.
Now, I think for the protection of human rights, three things are very important. One is the sincere will,
Yes, yes.
and this is mostly missing.
It has something to do with attitude and belief.
Yes, attitude, and also I think knowledge helps to the formation of this will. This is why the education, a kind of education of human rights is very important. And the third one is to be able to make right evaluations of the situations in order to find what one has to do in the existing conditions
Yes.
for the protection of human rights.
Right.
This is where I think we can solve the problem of cultures.
Yes.
Because in different cultures, in different conditions, not only cultural but in general conditions, we have to do different things to protect human rights.
Yes.
But this is not that because human rights are different
Yes.
here
yes.
and there. Human rights are always the same, and we must have the clear concepts of each right. In general, what are human rights? And this is not clear still in the minds.
Right.
Because you see that in the international instruments,
Yes.
there are, to me, rights that they are not basic rights.
Yes.
They
I
are
think.
basic and not basic rights.
Right. Right.
And this makes confusions and leads, one of the reasons that leads people to say that in different cultures they are different. Not the only one. The second one is, of course, political reasons. When people like you say, no, it's not in our culture. But I'm very, very severe in opposing that. I say human rights, if human rights bring demands for a special treatment of all human beings. If you say that doesn't belong to our culture, you don't consider yourself as human beings.
Right.
If you are, it's for every human being.
At least not.
You are a human being. I am a human being. He's a human being.
Not at least the idea of the civilized human being.
There is no, even not civilized human being.
Just human beings as
Just
such.
human being. Just human being.
I think the issue is that basic human rights, there's a debate now. The instruments that used for promoting human rights, say from the United States or from Western Europe, put a lot of emphasis on political rights, freedom of speech. Yeah.
Thank you. Here. Here. Thank you. Now, to me, according to my criterion that I developed, economic, social, and political rights are not basic rights.
Not basic rights.
Not basic rights. But there is a difference because the right to education is in the covenant on social and economic rights. But no, education is a basic right. The right to work is a basic right, but the right to have syndicates is not a basic right.
The right to have syndicate?
Yes, it's a social right. It's a way to protect some rights in the existing conditions. This is a social right, or not only economic, it's a social right. So the social, economic and social rights and political rights are rights that through which we can protect human rights, basic rights. And this depends on the way, there are limits drawn, as I say.
Sure.
Limits drawn to the citizens. And it's important how these limits are drawn. If it's are drawn by taking into consideration their implications for the citizens, for all the citizens of the country, then they protect these rights. Otherwise, if these limits are delineated by other determinants, mostly interests, group interests, then they don't protect human. There is a gap between basic rights and social and economic rights.
But the basic rights, in addition to education, what are some of the other basic rights?
Education, health, freedom. There are two different kinds to me. The right to education, the right to health, the right to food, the right, it's a standard of living, as it's called in the freedom of thought, freedom of opinion. Of course, the right to life, right to life. These are basic rights.
Normally, the first set, not education, but right to life, right to food, right to maybe clean water and clean air. Included.
Yes.
You know, that and the right to education and the right to freedom, and these two, how are they related? You know, the question is, China is arguing the right to life, right to food is something that we've done. For example, in only 7 years, more than 400 million people were lifted out of the abject poverty. So they said, we've done a lot. And on the other hand, I think their attention to not only rights of thought, right of speech, or even right of religion are not.
I'm not sure the right to speech, so-called right to speech, if it's separated from the right to the freedom of thought,
yes,
or freedom of opinion, is not a right.
You mean the right to speech is not?
Yes. It's
How about
not,
assembly, right of assembly?
the right of assembly is something between at the borderline of individual rights and collective rights. Now, because it's assembly, it's a group.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not directly a right like the others.
So the basic rights are rights related to the individual, or the
Yes.
dignity
Yes,
and autonomy of
individual.
the individual.
Directly to the group rights in my classification are not basic rights, but they are very important when they are implications of basic rights of individuals in existing conditions.
Yes. Yes.
Then, if they are not, they are interests, and it's very easy to confuse interest and rights,
Yes.
group rights.
Yes.
But group rights are not basic rights, but implications of basic rights. And one of them, it's very confused, the so-called cultural rights. It's a very confused concept. The right to culture is something different. It's an individual right.
Yes.
But the cultural rights are group rights. So we have to be very careful. And group rights are important, and I see only mother tongue is an important group right, mother tongue.
And of course, the question of privacy. My diaries,
Yes,
is that basic?
it is basic.
The John Stuart Mill,
But
talks
there,
about
there
it.
are problems. Many times I was asked when someone, it was in Germany, I was asked about this, when someone is beating his wife, the police will enter or not. And we had such a case in Turkey where there was someone killing his mother or his sister, and the police didn't go in. And it would, if he had go in, the people could have lived more.
Yes. So this is violation of human rights because the life has been threatened.
Yes, I say human rights also should not be taken by heart, understood by heart.
It's basically rationality or rational calculation?
No.
No.
No. Right evaluation.
Right of
Evaluation of the situation.
of the situation.
And of course, the will to protect rights.
Yes.
Not other intentions. But if I were a policeman, I would get in. And this is not prevented by the law, but people don't know even the law. They confuse things. A police may, in this situation, enter a house.
So
It's not against the right to privacy.
right, but what is the relationship between this distinction between ethics and cultural morals and the basic human rights?
Now, the first one is let us see the first distinction. Cultural morals, what I call cultural morals, are what the value judgments and norms, empirical norm prevailing in a group.
And specific to that group.
Specific to that group, but changing, of course. Not
Of course.
but
It's fluid.
And the problem is now we have the so-called multicultural society. On the same, in the same place, we find different cultures living together, and this is the problems. The
Yes.
problems, the reason of the problems. But these are the goods and the bads.
Sure, absolutely.
But these are value judgments to protect the order of this group. And if they are deduced with sagacity, such norms, they play an important role in our social life.
Yes.
But in the conditions that they are deduced. But when the conditions change,
Your understanding and application of
they
rights
have
will have to adjust.
no base.
Yes.
But people say it's our culture, and they try to
Yes.
have them on,
Right.
going on. And these are, in the meanwhile, there are new norms on the same issue.
Yes,
And new
yes.
approaches to the same issue. And the clashes come from there. So I say they are empirical, of empirical origin, norms of empirical origin. If we see how a value judgment, a cultural value judgment is formed, and how it is changed in time, we see that they have an empirical origin. They are usually deduced by a kind of induction.
Yes, yes.
Kind of
Now,
induction.
if you look at the situation between the migrant workers from Turkey and Germany,
In the States, you mean?
in Germany,
In Germany.
and the situation is such that the migrant workers bringing a different kind of set of cultural values, and the Germans would like to protect and order. And the Germans, for some time, had this now outmoded idea that ethnicity was the most important criteria. You know, a Turk lived in Germany for 10 or 20 years would not be considered as a German if someone in Russia was of German origin would be considered German. But right now they open up. Once they open up, then the society is changing very rapidly, not just Germany, but France and England, because of the population of these societies. You know, in Germany, about 80 million, but France, Italy, and England, all something like 50 million. So the situation is changing very dramatically. For a long, long time, there's the conception that the criteria and, of course, basic values in the West.
Not basic values or basic value judgments.
Oh,
We have
I
to
see,
be very
I
clear,
see.
very careful
It's basic,
to distinguish them.
yes, basic value judgments from the West, in a way, were voluntarily accepted by a number of society as universal.
They are
ethics.
not universal.
That's my question.
Cultural morals and norms are not universal.
I know, but the truth of the matter, say empirically, that these values, I would say local knowledge or local values, have become globally significant.
For example, which one you mean?
Some of the basic, like the idea of liberty, or the idea of due process of law, or idea of rationality, you know, enlightenment rationality. Certainly.
What is rationality?
Now, there are many forms of rationality now.
And then, if we speak of rationality, we come to the result that there are many rational. I'm strongly against all this debate.
I see.
I have a paper.
You're against.
I have a paper in Benin on that. Rationality and rationalities.
I see. Let's say Habermas' notion about communicative rationality, and how would you would that consider as a variation of rationality or not?
What is rationality? What do you mean by rationality?
I know
the opposite of metaphysics in a popular sense. This is the trouble. Metaphysical rational, metaphysical rational. So we have to transcend, to overcome this duality.
Let's say, you know, the kind of empirical science, either as a way of deduction or as a way of reduction, they believe is a rational discourse, very different from the romantic notion or from so-called Oriental mysticism. So there's a very strong sense in the West that science, which has a unique position, and there's no way you can do science without certain kind of a rational procedure. And would that considered as a specific case which is universalizable?
No. This is the positivistic approach to science.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
But important is knowledge, and that we have not only scientific knowledge.
Sure.
Philosophical knowledge is also knowledge, everyday knowledge.
Sure.
But what is knowledge?
Sure.
Knowledge is every proposition which has an object independent of the person who puts it forth. So we have different kinds of knowledge. But on the a proposition is a knowledge, piece of knowledge, if there is it has an object independent of the person who puts this proposition forth. So there are different kinds of knowledge.
So there's always an empirical and objective side to knowledge.
Knowledge is objective.
Right.
But what do you mean by, what I mean by object is not an ontological object, but relations.
Sure. So I don't know whether this makes sense or not. I make a distinction between private and personal.
Private and personal.
In the following sense, you know, we have Michael Polanyi's notion about personal knowledge or the tacit dimension. For example, it's private. I don't want to share with anyone. I hope the public will protect my privacy. But personal is something I feel very strongly, and maybe this kind of existential commitment. And I want my personal belief or my personal sense of the importance of something to be debated, to be discussed. So they are also transparent. So something that you feel very strongly, now using a rather awkward word, is embodied knowledge, experiential knowledge.
Now, we have to be very careful in using the words. I would never use the word belief for knowledge. Knowledge is not a belief. Although, let's say, pragmatism also and the neo-positivism, they take as unit of knowledge beliefs.
Sure.
No, beliefs are personal.
But
my beliefs go with me to the tomb.
yes, but there's one kind, the distinction I try to make is that, let's say, belief that personally felt strongly, it's not rational, but it's debatable. It's arguable.
Beliefs should not be debatable.
It's just a commitment which is dogma.
Yes. But you see, I think, so far as I can see, there are two kinds of belief. One is those beliefs who create their object. And another kind of beliefs, we believe in the truth of a proposition. And this proposition may be true, may be false, may be absurd. But for the believer, it makes no difference.
Right.
So by chance, a belief can be belief in the truth of a proposition, which is true. But
Yes.
this is by coincidence.
Yes. Yeah, but the first kind of belief which creates its own object, and that kind of belief is different from the second one,
Yes,
because the second
yes,
one is,
yes.
say, religious belief.
Religious beliefs is mostly the second one.
Yeah.
But let's say for Mohammed and
Yes,
the
of
other
course.
are of the first one.
The first one.
Yes, they
Oh,
create their objects, and then the others, the believers, take the beliefs and say Mohammed is or Jesus is saying the truth, or Confucius or whoever.
Yeah. So both of them would not be classified under the category of rationality.
I don't like the word rationality. What's
Oh.
rationality? I don't use the word rationality. I try to say what people understand of rationality, and what the people understand is the opposite of metaphysics. Rational, metaphysical. This couple of concepts. So personally, I don't use the word rational, never.
Do you have anything like a functional equivalent?
I say knowledge. Knowledge is very important.
Knowledge, I see.
Knowledge.
Is-
Because if it's knowledge, in a way, directly or indirectly, you can justify. It's not easy, of course, to justify a proposition with the past. It's not easy. I know the difficulties. But theoretically, it is verifiable, not justifiable, verifiable. Sorry, I use a false word. Verifiable.
So it's also falsifiable.
Also falsifiable, of course. Verifiable or falsifiable.
You make a distinction in this sense between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
So let's say the relationship between knowledge and wisdom, because you cannot simply reduce knowledge, reduce wisdom to knowledge, just as you cannot reduce knowledge to simply information or data.
Wisdom is a personal characteristic. There are wise people, and this specificity of them is what we call wisdom. Knowledge is something different. Knowledge are propositions.
Say a person who is considered wise and not necessarily very knowledgeable.
In which sense?
For
Not very-
example, a guru or a sage. And I think in the Confucian tradition, there's a distinction. Say you really don't have to have a lot of knowledge, because knowledge itself is.
No, just a moment. We have to use we have to have a clear concept of knowledge. Knowledge is not information.
Certainly not.
So you must not have much knowledge, what I say, to have learned a lot of things. But knowledge is something is gained in our contact with the object, directly with the object.
So, let's say virtue ethics, the internalization of values in the Aristotelian sense. Will you say it's a form of moral knowledge?
To know, no, it's philosophical knowledge. To know what, let us say, justice, to be just is, or to know what any virtue is philosophical knowledge, but to become virtuous is something different. Knowledge is very important in this respect, because if you are not aware of what wisdom is, or of what, the very important Aristotelian, what is it? Phronesis is, let us
Phronesis,
say.
yeah, phronesis.
It's an intellectual virtue, in fact. It's not an ethical virtue. Then you do things by chance. But and if you are, we have the examples you gave, the sages. They have an empirical knowledge, which is gathered with the time, when people reflect on things. But it's difficult to be to be consistent.
Yes.
It's difficult to be consistent. But if you are aware, you have the knowledge of this, you are also consistent.
Now, normally, in the Confucian tradition, you can say the ultimate meaning of life is not only realizable, but ought to be realized in ordinary human existence. So each and every human being is aware of something which is not virtue ethics in a strict sense. There's, I don't know whether this position that Mencius argues that like empathy or sympathy, or a sense of not necessarily right or wrong, but sense to know. In other words, I say the ability to know, the ability to will, the ability to...
This is practical wisdom. Practical wisdom, which is important, of course, for life.
Yeah, but these practical, these forms of practical wisdom, can these forms be understood as naturally and necessarily human, or they have to be learned?
They have to be learned, and also they have to be evaluated. Before we try to spread them, they have to be evaluated philosophically, because it can be a virtue, human virtue, but it can be also a value judgment related to the time. So we cannot take for granted what sages or prophets said. They said also very important things.
They have to be evaluated and based upon the empirical situation.
Yes.
And in this particular sense, the philosophical knowledge about human rights is a precondition.
No, it's not a precondition. I say human rights are ethical principles, but all ethical principles are not human rights.
Sure.
So we have to make this, and there are many questions now, especially there is a confusion between ethical questions and human rights questions, especially in bioethics now.
Bioethics.
Bioethics. Every question is not a question of human rights.
Oh, sure, I agree.
Ethical question.
I agree.
So, no, the opposite. ethics is the basis of human rights.
Yeah,
The opposite.
sure. But ethics covers a much larger range
Yes.
than human rights, which
Yes.
which is very specific.
Yes. They are not specific. They are very. What do you mean by specific? Not
Now,
to be clear.
there's a realm that we consider human rights, and including basic rights and other forms of rights.
But when I say human rights, are only basic rights.
Okay,
Not the other rights.
right. So the ethical realm is much larger
Of course.
than these basic human rights.
Yes.
And these, I agree with you. If you focus on the basic rights and the possibility of global or universal ethics can be established. So it's not universal ethics in the general sense of the term. It's very specific to the basic human rights. But these basic human rights, as they express themselves in different cultural traditions, they remain.
No, they shouldn't express themselves in different traditions.
No. I agree with you. I think they are universalizable, and they are.
Now, by universal human rights, I mean we have to be clear on the concept of universal. Now, universal is used in valid everywhere. No, I say. Human rights are, and this is for all practical principles, I think, universality of them means they bring demands for every human being.
Yeah, but you agree.
Whether,
you agree with that.
whether they are enforced or not everywhere.
Yeah, but you're basically in agreement with that position, right? And so you mentioned, in passing, that you feel a little bit uneasy about Hans Kuhn's approach to human rights.
Yes. Not human rights, ethics.
Oh no, universal ethics.
Ethics.
Yeah.
This I said that with the first principle, but for me, ethical life is based on knowledge, not on norms. Norms can help us, including human rights, when we are not able to make right evaluations in a given situation. They increase the probability to protect value. But it's not absolute. The important is to be able to evaluate a situation correctly and then do what should be done so that values are protected. Individuals of value and values are protected or not be damaged at least. But it's not easy. But human rights are important for public life. For public life and for legislation.
And order, social order.
Yes. The order has to be based on human rights.
Yes.
But in our personal relations with the others, ethics is important.
Sure.
But this means ethics, I don't understand ethics as sets of norms. Ethical knowledge is very important. So this ethical norms can help, and I say that for all professional ethics, so-called professional ethics, they can help to protect value when we have not sufficient knowledge of the situation. But they don't guarantee it.
They don't
guarantee it.
Sure.
They don't
They
guarantee
don't, because our knowledge about a particular subject can be deepened, can be broadened, and sometimes we consider it ethical at different
But
junctures.
for legislation, it's important to take them as basis. But in given situations, one has to be very careful to make right evaluations. And because otherwise, why we want human rights? In order to protect value and people,
Yes.
human beings, to protect human beings. If we, by using a right, we don't do that, so
Sure.
why?
You actually have a lot of reservation with the idea, which is not just Confucian, it's also Jewish. Do not do to others what you
Yes,
would not want others
the
to do to
so-called
you.
golden rule.
Oh, no, the golden rule normally is understood, do to others what you would want others to do to you.
Yes.
But the Confucian and
Don't do.
Greek don't. Yeah.
Don't do this.
But you have some reservation about that.
I have great reservations to consider it the most important ethical principle. Because I say it's a typical example of hypothetical imperative with Kant's language. It's easy to understand each other with this Kantian term.
Yeah.
If you want this, do that. Or if you want this, don't do that. If you don't want this, don't do that. So it's not a categorical imperative. I say I don't, even I never would have suffered this treatment. I would do it myself. I had if there will be a workshop on, I will speak on human dignity. What is human dignity? Then I start with that. Once there was a television program, a live program. So the person who was speaking with me, the journalist, he said, "Professor, you made a connection between philosophy and torture." I was shocked. What? But it was a live production. Then I said, there is no connection between philosophy and torture. But when you look at the fact of torture with philosophical ethical knowledge, we see the following, that people think that the tortured person is degraded. I say no. Degraded is the person who tortures, because he couldn't do that, but the other one is staying like that. So it's not in all ethical relations we protect our human dignity by what we are doing, not by what we suffer. But people, even the title of the convention and the declaration against inhuman, degrading treatment, and torture is considered to be a degraded treatment. No, I say degrading for those who torture, not for the tortured.
This word torture.
So in all ethical relations like that, I say I don't do that. We had this summer camping for children on human rights, and we called it "I don't do that" in Turkish, because it's important. This is why a kind of a human rights education is very important.
Sure. So
Please.
I don't do that. Actually, specifically, I don't do that to someone.
Or in general, if it's
to an animal too. Okay.
not to animal, but if I use my vote also.
Vote.
It's not against someone, but if it's
For
also
something. For
an
something.
action of mine.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. You have to have some breakfast. Are you going to a meeting?
Okay.
Okay. Then,
No problem.
So, what I think it's very critical in understanding not the philosophical background, but in terms your own style of reasoning. If you want to identify the philosophical resources in terms of your own reasoning, and Kant is extremely important. What are some other great minds philosophically that inform your own philosophizing, your own doing philosophy?
You see, Kant is very important, but it's not sufficient for me.
Sure.
I start my own ethics from by saying, and goodwill, with a sentence from Camus, The Plague. Et la bonne volonté peut faire autant de dégâts que la méchanceté si elle n'est pas éclairée. And goodwill can cause the same damage if it's not sufficiently enlightened.
Sure. The whole Buddhist tradition is based upon compassion, which is a form of sympathy. And another tradition that
Sympathy and compassion is the same word etymologically.
Sure. And the other one, for example, right now this not a declaration, a declaration of compassion as a declaration of human rights. Now, the question there is that if, in practical terms, your sympathetic response to the people very close to you often are more intense than your sympathetic response to a stranger. But the idea is that you really need to extend your sympathetic responses to your parents or to your children. Without this expansion, that sympathy suffocates and becomes totally constrained. And so the extension of sympathy is to involve an ever-expanding network of people. And that's commonly considered as an important ethical evaluation of the
It's
human.
very important. It's normal to start from our most nearest people and then go to the world.
Right.
This is important. But we have to be very careful not to confuse this wisdom with philosophical knowledge. Because this is important because it has a basis, a basis of epistemic basis, what we say. This attitude to have, to care, to care for
others.
for your people around you, and then for your compatriots, and for the whole world. So it's very important. But why we can justify it? It's not because it's said by a saint or by a wise
Because in
man.
common experience.
Yes. Not because we can evaluate it, see that why it's important. It's not sufficient that it is said by someone who admire or who. We have to justify it. To justify.
More recently, I think, first in French, then now in many languages, this Pierre Hadot, he talks about philosophy as a way of life. And then the subtitle is Spiritual Exercises, from Socrates to even Michel Foucault.
It's not philosophy that it's a way of life based on philosophy.
No,
Because people confuse worldviews with philosophical knowledge, and I'm strictly against that. Worldviews are not philosophy, but they are important. I don't mean that they are Lebensanschauung.
yes.
They are important.
Yes.
Some of them are important, perhaps not all of them, but we have not to consider them as philosophy.
If we look at the, I can even say the evolution of philosophical thinking as it changes in some way, especially since the 19th century, especially in the 20th century, there's a professionalization of philosophy. You know, people who are consider themselves philosophers or teachers of philosophers are in philosophy departments. So this professionalization helps to establish standards, I think, especially in the analytical school.
The analytical school is a very narrow school.
Yes, okay. And of course you have phenomenology and
It's very
others.
important up to a point. If they try to analyze concepts, it's good. It's something important, but it's not the only aim of philosophy. This is a tool.
Yes, yes. But what is your view about the professionalization? You know, we say they are philosophers, they are sociologists. My sense is that all the other disciplines may have their own criteria and they do their job well. But philosophy, if it turned out to be a profession, the reflexivity of the philosopher in understanding his or her own work continues. So I agree with you that analytical tools are significant, but will you consider the continental philosophical thinking, phenomenology and so forth, a much more appropriate way of trying to use the tools and try to think philosophically about everything.
Phenomenology, of course, there are different branches also of phenomenology, is important because he calls attention to the object.
Yes.
Zurück zu den Sachen. Husserl.
Yes.
From this side is important, not from every side. And this, the analytical school, uses this dichotomy. Either is science or metaphysics. And
they try to-
the starting point is propositions, not the object. Not the object. So it's good, but we should never forget, I think, why we do the sciences, why we do philosophy, for a better world, for a better life, for a more humane life. We must never forget that. And philosopher is the one who brings new knowledge in this area.
Sure.
It's not a profession like the others. You are a teacher of philosophy. This is a profession, perhaps. But a philosopher is the person who brings new knowledge.
What is your evaluation of I think contemporary philosophical thinking, not Kant, but Nietzsche. Nietzsche becomes very powerful as a resource. So the people who consider themselves deconstructionist, or the people who consider themselves, I don't know, what is your evaluation of, say, Heidegger?
I'm not in good relations with Heidegger, but Nietzsche is very important and very easy to misunderstand him.
Yes.
I have a book on Nietzsche. I read the whole work at the time. Not the whole Montinari edition, but the Schlechter edition. I read everything.
You know this Walter Kaufmann?
Yes.
Yeah, he's done the translation.
It's a little psychoanalytic approach of Walter Kaufmann. It's a dangerous thinker if you don't be careful in distinguishing who makes speak. I distinguish between three types in Nietzsche, and you can find also contradiction. No, he's very important, but you have to know him as a whole, because he's not a systematic writer.
No.
You have to systematize things, his ideas.
What are the three aspects?
He speaks of the so-called die Herde, the mass man.
The overman or the superman?
No, the mass man. No, then he speaks of another type who tries to become free from this from what he has already learned, the morals of his time, of his society. And then they manage to do that, but they stay until the end of their life, either as protesting permanently, or they become ascets. They prefer an ascetic life. And there is the third type who has become a Übermensch.
The what?
The third type is the Übermensch. The creative person in any area.
So the difference between the masterman and the so-called overman or superman is what?
He enumerates the characteristics of the Superman. He is creative. And he has in Zarathustra a very nice metaphor. I will speak to you of three metamorphoses of the mind, of Geist. How the mind or the human person has become a camel. Camel. Then how he has become a lion and then a child.
I see.
So,
Okay, I think thank you very much. I've taken a lot of your time.